Good day. Welcome to the Cory Morgan Show. Getting into summer now. Man, it's nice out there. And it's about time. I make no secret of my hatred of winter, and I hate it more with every year. So I'll savor this weather while we've got it. And give me something to brighten me up. So counterbalances my sour commentary and reporting on all those negative stories. Either way, I got lots to comment on today and lots to cover. A little while, I'm going to have David Clement come on. He's from the Consumer Choice Center, and he's written, he's done a whole study on cartel activity in Canada. Yeah, it's really happening here. I mean, we're busy chasing down people for mischief. And meanwhile, Mexican cartels are operating within our country. We really have our priorities on straight. Be sure to use that comment scroll, guys. Send questions my way, chat with each other, utilize that. I appreciate it. Lets me know somebody's out there. Just keep things civil, and we can all get along and cover some good things here. So let's get on to what has got me worked up. I mean, yeah, after seeing Molotov cocktails thrown at peaceful people sitting around in Colorado, I just had to get this off my chest. I mean, Gazans, and I'm tired of people making excuses for them. They've chosen to continue to support Hamas, and they refuse to release their remaining hostages. Well, Israel's reducing their city to rubble. Israel's not going to stop until every one of its citizens have been accounted for, and it shouldn't. The fanatics of Gaza have refused all efforts to resolve the conflict created by the Hamas attack on families and a music festival, the attendees on October 7th, 2023. And those Gazans cheered as the bodies of victims were dragged through their streets, and they've collectively worked to hide the location of Hamas members' rocket launching sites and hostages among them. Let's not pretend they don't know where it all is. Israel has not been committing genocide. Gazans have been committing a form of collective suicide. The conflict in Gaza is slowly winding to an end as the rats of Hamas are running out of holes to hide in. A resolution is coming, even though it's going to leave Gaza as a pile of dust. The problem the world must face now, though, are the cult-like Hamas supporters who've sprung up like weeds in developed nations, as their vile, hate-filled protests have failed to create the world movement to prevent Israel from defending itself and its existence. The people and groups behind this movement have become increasingly extreme. The facade of being a movement in support of Palestinian independence slipped away long ago. They're driven by an anti-Jewish hatred, and they're fueled by Islamist fundamentalists. Cadres of white-bread middle-class idiots in Western universities cosplay and keffiyehs while marching with groups calling to globalize the intifada and chanting death to Jews. It's astounding this sick movement has managed to gain such a toehold in societies we'd previously thought civilized enough not to tolerate this kind of hate anymore. In BC, protesters and our own reporter Jared caught that on video. They were chanting, "We are Hamas, we are Hezbollah," while they're burning Canadian flags and chanting "Death to Canada." So we can't pretend what these guys are about, guys, but the authorities apparently don't see this as a risk. In Toronto, the ongoing campaign of intimidation has been carried out for 18 months as masked losers and thugs target Jewish neighborhoods and businesses. In response, the Toronto police forces have brought the Hamas supporters coffee and donuts. I wish I was kidding. Shoppers are accosted in malls, encampments were set up in universities, and roads are chronically blocked with hate protests. At least in BC, Ontario, and Quebec they are. Alberta took a different approach to the Hamas supporters than the other provinces. When the encampments were set up in Alberta, universities police tore them down within days and laid charges. When the protesters tried to block Calgary streets during rush hour, the police swooped in and cleared them out and laid charges. And guess what happened? Disruptive extremist protests in Alberta stopped. There's still some pro-Hamas losers and demonstrations, but they don't dare try to block roads, target neighborhoods, or set up encampments because enforcement works. The Hamas movement's dominated by cowards. Who else would join a movement in support of the orgy of rape and murder Hamas committed? Hamas supporters in Canada hide behind masks and numbers. The moment it appears they may face charges, though, they suddenly fall into line. They don't really want to sacrifice their own personal well-being for their supposed distant friends in Gaza. They get a sense of personal accomplishment in somehow threatening a local minority, but they won't put their own comfort at risk. You certainly don't see the Queers for Palestine actually flying to the Middle East in person, do you? The permissive attitudes of the West have fostered a movement that glorifies murder and hate. Now there's lunatics being spawned by the Hamas movement, and they're murderous. The young Jewish couple has been gunned down in Washington. And yeah, a Molotov cocktail was tossed into a peaceful group of Jews in Colorado. And local politicians like a Green Party candidate celebrated that crap. If left unchecked, the North American Hamas movement is going to lead to more deaths. Some voices said, we mustn't take sides in this conflict as theirs, but we must. One side's clearly evil. Only one side's been blocking streets in their prayers, shooting at Jewish schools, lighting smoke bombs, targeting Jewish businesses, and burning flags. Only one side is chanting death to Canada, and only one side insists on wearing masks and attacking property. There's only one side doing that, guys. That side's the pro-Hamas side, and it's got to be stamped out of Canada as mercilessly and as effectively as it has been in Gaza. Participants celebrating Hamas are supporting a terrorist group. The second they cross any legal line, they should be arrested. If they're citizens, they should be charged. And if they aren't citizens, they got to be sent the hell back to wherever they came from without hesitation. This isn't complicated or nuanced. It's a festering movement of dangerous hate building in Canada, and it's only getting worse as we refuse to crack down upon it. We can't pretend it isn't our problem anymore, guys. It is. It's on our streets, and it's time that it stopped. No, I'm not going to say that. All right. And here's a moron to show an example. Mama May says Zionism is using Jews as a human shield. Yeah, right. Okay. You're blocked and banned. So, my show, I choose who gets to speak, and you anti-Jew screwballs can piss off. Dave, what's new in the world today besides that?
Well said, Cory. Couldn't have said it by myself.
Well, you did some great stuff yourself. Your story just came out.
And I just published a story. Great timing. We didn't even talk about this, believe it or not. But I published a story. I think it's entitled 7 Hours of Hell. We went to a kibbutz in southern Israel called Nir Oz, and it's the closest to Gaza. It's only 1.8 kilometers away. And it was the first one hit at 6:29 a.m. on October 13th. And we talked to one of the village elders who was there when he tried to when he set up the Hamas or the kibbutz in 1957, and he told us the horror story of that day. Their plan had been, the practice had always been, they have a local security force of seven men, and those 7 men were supposed to hold off any attack for 15 minutes until the Israeli Defense Forces arrived. And that didn't happen that day. The Israeli Defense Forces didn't arrive for 7 hours, and that security response team was all killed. So the terrorists had free range to do whatever they wanted in this little village of 400 peaceful souls. And by the time they were done, 121 of them were dead or kidnapped or raped. 60% of the houses were burned. Just an orgy of violence that is incomprehensible to me, Cory. Like they were all hepped up on a drug and a type of amphetamines, and they're just, I don't understand that bloodthirsty mentality. How you can do that?
We're lucky to live in a civilized society where this isn't happening. Well, and that's what I mean, though. We're seeing people celebrating it here, and that's what just brought it to a head for me. I mean, we're horrified. We don't understand it, but there's actually seeds of it here.
Yeah, this was the kibbutz where the Bilbas family was kidnapped from. You'll remember them. They became sort of a spotlight on the crisis in Gaza. Family of 4 kidnapped to Gaza. They eventually released the father, and then they had claimed that the 2 young children, both under 4, had been killed in Israeli air attacks. And then they made a deal, and they sent back the bodies of mom and her two kids. And it turns out they sent a body of a Palestinian woman, not the mom. They did send the kids, and forensic testing showed that they had been murdered by bare hands, and then the bodies mutilated. So it really is just an upsetting story to read, but needs to be told.
It does. Well, and I appreciate you telling it.
Yeah. In other news, we've got a report out today by the province of Alberta on oil sands emissions. They're down 26% since 2012. So Mark Carney can put that in his pipe and smoke it. Speaking of Carney, he said in the House yesterday, there's no need to spend money to get the economy rolling again. And then they introduce a $500 billion spending bill.
Yeah.
And he speaks out 2 sides of his mouth. And the Online Harms Act is back for Act 3. They're going to try and push it through for a 3rd time and regulate you and me on the internet and what we can and cannot say.
Yeah, they are bound and determined to control speech and that's people should be concerned.
Oh, extremely concerned. So we can only hope it fails. 3 strikes, and hopefully it's out.
It should. I guess get your VPNs ready.
Yep.
You can bypass it, but still, we shouldn't have to.
No, not at all.
All right.
And you had an exciting day yesterday?
Yesterday?
The day before in Regina?
Regina, yes. I went out to Independence Town Hall in Regina. Yeah, they packed them in. Boy, it was like 500-600 people there.
Yeah.
Very enthusiastic.
When you speak, do you imagine like everybody naked? Is that what they tell people to do?
Could you imagine if I got an erection up there? It's those clear podiums. It would be terrible.
Yeah, that would be terrible.
But I am terrified while I speak, so I use other methods to keep myself going. But not that one. No, that would be that would make news.
Yeah, well, keep doing it. Practice makes perfect.
You bet. All right. Well, and I guess, next week we're set up at the Global Petroleum Show. Are we going to leave you in a nice quiet office while we're also?
Yes, I'm going to be here by myself. I think the entire staff down there. I couldn't be looking forward to it more. But happy to check in remotely for the news update.
Good. I will probably take you up on that.
See you then.
All right. Thanks, Dave.
Go Panthers, go.
That's right. Yeah, speaking of divisive issues, I was trying to stay somewhat impartial on that. But that is our news editor, Dave Naylor. Lots on the go. As you see, yes, he's been flying around the world and writing an excellent series of stories on what he saw over there in Israel. I mean, it's just terrible. But plus, he's also managing our stories, our news copy, and all of that in that busy newsroom with our reporters across the country. And the reason we're doing it, the reason we can, the reason we can afford it, is because of you. This one I got to nag you, but this is how we pay the bills, guys. Subscribe. If you haven't subscribed yet, get on there, westernstandard.news/subscription. $10 a month, $100 for a year. Like an old newspaper subscription. It pays for all these things and keeps us independent of the federal government. We don't want to take their money, guys. Once you start taking their money, it's like any addiction, and you end up, answering to them. When we're subscription-based, it makes us answerable to you. So if you've subscribed again, thank you. And if you haven't, come on, get on it. Yeah, I got to go on another quick rant, before I get on to more serious things and so on. Well, this is serious too. I was walking here today. I walk quite a ways because I'm cheap. I don't like paying to park all the way downtown where our offices are, so I park quite a ways away, and I can use the steps anyways. But I saw these things. This is the first time I saw them. They are in Calgary now, building these parking spaces on the roads for scooters. They're taking up more parking spaces. They're sticking them right in the intersections of corners, so the cars can't get next to each other to turn the corner. It's already causing a headache. What a symbol of the idiocy of Calgary City Hall and their ideological anti-automobile stance, because that's what this is about. We don't see backups of scooters with nowhere to park. There's not a demand for this. There's not a need for this. The only intention of this is to screw with drivers. This has been Calgary's ongoing campaign for quite some time. They want to push people out of their vehicles because they feel everybody else will start walking to work, riding bicycles, or riding the bus once they buy their stab-proof vests and don't mind wearing rubber boots so they don't step on the feces at the LRT stations. Rather than making it more desirable to use alternative forms of traffic, they're trying to make it undesirable to use the preferred form of traffic. Look at that stupid box. You notice the thing with it? And I walked by a few of them on the way here. They're putting them all over the place. I didn't see a single scooter in one because nobody needs them. It's ridiculous. You can't ride a scooter on the streets, though people do, but legally you shouldn't. But apparently you should park them on the streets. This is where Calgary's tax dollars are going. And I know it's not unique to Calgary. It's the same rationale and logic of a lot of the bike lanes and bike tracks. You know what you never see on them? Cyclists. You see shopping carts, dogs, people parking illegally on them perhaps. Some of them are fairly well utilized on a nice day, but for the most part, people ride bike paths. But again, the city knows that. The goal is to screw with cars. So it's just absurd. And this is an election year in Calgary. So guys, and in Edmonton. So, if you want to stop this crap, this is the year to do it. All right, let's get on to my guest, Dave Clement, and he's with the Consumer Choice Center. And similar to kind of what I was talking about, when I guess you could say distant problems are actually impacting us here, even if we don't want to deal with it. We've got cartel activity happening in Canada. And he did quite a report on it on his site there at the Consumer Choice Center, and I really want to talk about it. And actually, a story came out about that today. So thanks for joining us today, David.
Thank you very much for having me.
So, I'll just, kind of let you lay that out. What on earth is going on? How are we becoming a place for cartels to operate?
Yeah, well, how I got to this was I mean, the Trump administration has said some pretty outlandish things. Peter Navarro, who's a senior advisor for Trump, had said that cartels are have overtaken Canada. He wasn't talking about the dairy cartel because that, of course, would be true. Um, and so that kind of prompted me to be like, okay, well, what is actually real here? And the purpose of the report was to actually evaluate how expansive are cartel operations in Canada. And so by going through various drug busts, RCMP data, some forecasting and estimates, it is not true that cartels have overtaken Canada, but their presence in Canada is significant. It is growing and it is increasingly moving online, which I think is the real interesting um, fact here is that we're seeing a shift. When people think of the things that cartels deal with or the products that they deal, they usually think cocaine. There's been some extra attention to fentanyl. Um, what I found is it's predominantly fentanyl, cocaine, methamphetamine, and illegal tobacco. And rather than your traditional kind of street dealer, right, someone selling something on the street or out of the trunk of a car, a lot of these sales are actually happening online. The payments are being processed by either credit card companies or Interact via e-transfer and shipped to people's doors via Canada Post. And the reason why that matters and the shift in cartel activity is that my estimate, which is a pretty conservative estimate, the total value of the black market for those four illegal products is over $2.6 billion. So it's a substantial black market that the cartels have expanded their operations in, and it's really important for the Carney government to get a handle on this. One, for public safety. When the cartels arrive, everyone knows the violence that ensues, and two, for our relationship with the United States, because that has been a priority for them. And so the goal of my report was to highlight some very key, very easy areas where government could take action and start to chip away at where the cartels are making millions and millions and millions of dollars operating in Canada.
Yeah, so I had a commenter, Andrea T, saying, and it's a good point. Cartels and triads, exactly. They've been here for a long time. Organized crime is nothing new, often with ethnic basis uniting them. What's different this time, or is it becoming more, entrenched? Is it becoming a larger problem than it used to be?
It's a much larger problem. I would say what's different is cartel activity, if we rewound, let's say 15 years, was predominantly sending illegal drugs into Canada, and then those would be sold through criminal networks, biker gangs, you name it. Kind of what you would see in a TV show, the kind of stereotype. What we see now is significant operations within Canada that are run by the Mexican cartels. And so they're not just sending cocaine, let's say, north of the border for it to be sold by others. With the case of fentanyl, I mean, the super lab in BC tied to Mexican cartels, we're talking about a serious capacity production facility that's producing fentanyl on a massive scale. That is different. That is very different than just sending drugs north of the border and having other people do the legwork. That is producing it domestically, and that's just for fentanyl. The different drugs and illegal tobacco that are also included in the report have different mechanisms, but generally speaking, across the board, it's expanding, it's becoming more problematic, and becoming more sophisticated.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you mentioned online sales, and I mean a whole new area. If anybody learns how to take advantage of new technology, it always seems to be the criminal element. Uh, Sam Cooper exposed a lot with the cartel activity and overseas with money laundering. I mean, Canada's always been kind of a soft touch for that through our casinos and things like that. But if they start working into a digital world, then the cash laundering doesn't even become such a priority for them, does it? I mean, they can do it without laundering now.
Well, that is possible. That is possible. It depends on how much money and how long these sites can stay operational. I'll give you an example of what was particularly shocking for me with these websites. So completely public facing, um, have a user experience that's similar to Amazon. You could buy ketamine, cocaine, 100 cartons of illegal cigarettes, you name it. Um, Paid for via Interact, so via e-transfer. They give you all the instructions, including the email that you can pay with, that you pay to, and you can ship it express post via Canada Post, and even in some instances have it insured if the dollar value is higher than a certain threshold. And so it was just an incredibly brazen scale of operations that are out there in the public, where it would appear that Canada Post either doesn't know or doesn't care. It would appear that some of the financial institutions either don't know or don't care. And that's a problem because, I mean, I'm not a compliance officer at a major bank, but with public facing emails for where the e transfer goes, all a major financial institution would have to do would be to search if that account or if that email is linked to a deposit account that is in their system.
Well, they had no problems tracking people who donated to the truckers' convoy somehow. You would think they'd be able to use that sort of investigative technique for drug cartels and people purchasing from them. At least Canada Post has found one growth area. They're not doing well anywhere else, but I imagine we still would want to stomp that out. Another wrinkle that's come, though, and I suspect that's part of what leads to a bit of the reticence on the authorities to dealing with this, is there's been some cooperation with cartels operating on First Nations reserves, which leaves, I think, police forces and others a bit more, as they said, reticent to kind of want to step in there because that brings along a whole new associated problem.
Yeah, and this is the thing is I don't think that there's anything wrong with indigenous companies exercising their protected rights to manufacture cigarettes, but you can't be collaborating with a designated terrorist entity. I think that that is where, let's say, one right and one crime collide head on, and that is where something has to be done. You mentioned Sam Cooper. He had a great piece out yesterday on exactly that, and it isn't even necessarily, and I wouldn't want it to be perceived as me accusing indigenous people or these indigenous companies per se as being criminal enterprises, but they create a very lucrative product that the cartel can capitalize on. And the last thing an indigenous community needs in this country is for cartel members or cartel activity to infiltrate their way into the reserves, because that is how you get all of the ugly and nasty things that we see in Mexico, where they take over entire towns and people disappear. These are not people you want to do business with. And by no means should any legal enterprise be collaborating with these entities whom are now designated as terror groups.
Yeah, I mean, Canadian Indigenous people are already suffering from enough socioeconomic challenges, and then having setups. I mean, fentanyl's devastating them. They,
Yep.
they 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 certainly don't need to be the hub of where it's being produced or distributed. Uh, as you pointed out with that lab, though, and that the one that got busted, the one. I mean, we got to presume there's others. Uh, it was described as a super lab, so I mean, export has to be part of the concern. There's only so much Canadian demand for these. Trump is
Mhm.
bombastic. He makes a lot of things up. He's exaggerated the amount of risk, perhaps, that comes from
Yep.
Canada. But we can't pretend there's no drugs coming from up here and ending up south of the border, can we?
Or ending up in other markets like Japan or Australia or Asia or Europe. And I mean, it was often said, right? The rebuttal from Ottawa was, well, we only found a relatively small amount of fentanyl leaving the country. There are two problems with that analysis. So, one, we do a particularly poor job of scanning at our ports. I think the figure is less than 5% of everything coming in or going out of the port of Vancouver. Two, if we find a super lab that can operate on an industrial scale to produce enough doses to kill everybody in Canada, it's certainly not for the domestic market, right? It has to be going somewhere else. And that is, for me, is so blatantly obvious that if there is so much production capacity in Canada, then we have to be sending it somewhere, right? Because it isn't just sitting around. And as terrible as the fentanyl crisis is, that fentanyl is not being consumed by Canadians because we would have swaths and swaths of dead bodies all across the country all the time. And so it has to be going somewhere. It's obviously leaving the country, whether it's going to the United States or other countries. I think is part of why it's important we actually investigate this and not dismiss it, because two things can be true at the same time. And this is part of the problem with the political discussion is, as you mentioned, Trump can be an exaggerator. He can manufacture things and make things up. However, a broken clock is right twice a day. And even if there's a sliver or a grain of truth, we do have a duty to sort this out for our own good, right? For our own good to prevent the expansion of cartel activity in this country.
Yeah, well, and you mentioned it. I mean, 5%. I've heard as low as 1%, even when it comes to our port. That's been a weak spot, and I hadn't even really thought of the fact that we might be exporting to other nations. But if we have such weak border security at the ports, it only makes sense. Of course, you can get things on ships, and you can hit darn near any country with this. But it's tough. Interdiction of drug exports, imports. I mean, developed countries have been trying to deal with this for decades. The wave of cocaine in the 80s from Colombia and through Mexico into the United States. I mean, what they spent trying to stem that flow, and they never really were all that terribly successful with it. What do you think Canada can and should do then to try and deal with this?
Well, I think the easiest step right now, and this is part of what I implied in the report, is we've created this terror designation for cartels. And the penalties that come with associating with a terrorist organization. So when I say terrorist organization, these are the same penalties we would apply to an organization or an individual who was caught collaborating with Al Qaeda or Hamas or Hezbollah or you name it, the worst in the world. And so the implications here, based on what we've just set the table for judicially, is that the institutions could be incredibly and financially implicated in any of these penalties that could come about. An example would be TD Bank in the US just settled prior to the designation for north of $1 billion because it was found that there was cartel activity that they knew about and they didn't do anything about. And so now that we have this terror designation, the stakes are much higher. And the stakes are also much higher because this is an ongoing problem. If you look at fentanyl, how many people has that killed? It's a shame and a disaster, but it's also a problem for how we navigate our way, hopefully, out of a trade war with the United States.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, even with the dairy cartel, though, it's not as serious a problem as the other cartels. They both are sticking points. I mean, if you don't like Trump, if you don't like the trade war, well, we've got to stop giving him ammunition in the spots where he is correct, and
Yes.
take those bullets out of his gun in this trade war. Then, and this would be one of them. I mean, it's a game of whack-a-mole to try and keep it down. We'll never eliminate it, but we've got to show that we're being genuine in trying to deal with this and at least make it as difficult as possible for them to operate.
Well, and just imagine if I put my political strategist hat on for a second, just imagine a press conference where the Minister of Justice comes out and says, "All right, guys, here's the progress we've made. We've identified 100 websites that are dealing products that are linked to Mexican cartels, and we've shut them down." And we've frozen the bank accounts of those who of the bank accounts of the websites and those who are associated because we mean business. That would be a very big, very splashy, very effective way to show the Trump administration and show Donald Trump that we mean business while also cutting off this brazenly illegal means for these terrorist organizations and criminal networks to make money.
Well, yeah, when they're setting up websites and operating, as you said, that brazenly. I mean, we've got stuff we can take care of, and we bloody well should. I mean, it's just kind of embarrassing that it's gotten that far. So before I let you go, where can people find your work with the Consumer Choice Center and what you're up to? I know you cover a heck of a lot more than just this, but it was a very interesting outlying kind of subject to bring up.
Yeah, consumerchoicecenter.org. In the research tab there, you'll find the full 6,000 word report, which goes into all of the nitty gritty, the history of cartel activity, the kind of market forecast for the black markets, and some of the examples of just how brazen these websites are in terms of how they operate. So yeah, consumerchoicecenter.org or at Clement Liberty on Twitter or X.
Yes, yeah, it's hard to keep up.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thanks for your work on that report and your work in general, and for coming on today, David. I look forward to talking again soon. Maybe we'll get on to supply management again or something a little more domestic. But for now, I appreciate the cartel work.
Looking forward to it. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So yeah, guys, look him up, David Clement, the Consumer Choice Center. They cover a lot of things, and the report was really good. These are issues we've got to cover everything, right? And they're all issues that impact trade, impact our economy, and impact our safety. I mean, cartels, they're scary folks. As you said, look at the stuff they do in Mexico. There's some valid points, though. I see a commenter, Ian Leslie, saying, why hasn't the U.S. border security been finding this crossing the American border? They control their border. And that's one of the things that kind of Trump turned on its head. It's very valid. I mean, realistically, your responsibility of keeping things out of your country is yours. If things are coming in, it should be up to you. I mean, Trump will say anything and everything. We know that. He also likes talking about saying we got to, that he's subsidizing Canada because there's a $200 billion trade deficit, which is absolutely, I mean, the deficit's true. The subsidy aspect is completely untrue. But the reality is that Trump has a hammer that he can swing to really mess with our economy and push us around. So it doesn't matter what his premise is. We have to deal with it when he puts it out there. I think when it comes to the border security in Canada, it should, we should be both sides dealing with it if it's going to be effective. I mean, if it's the United States' responsibility to keep everything from coming in, and we just say that's the case of it, well, that's how you end up with a wall getting built on the Canadian border, or much more stringent crossing requirements for us when we go down. I go down with the fifth wheel every winter. I don't want to have to go through an end-to-end search on my fifth wheel every year because the Americans don't feel confident that we're keeping the stem of things from going down. I think it takes both sides. The Canadian-American border, if you've ever been down to it in the prairies, I surveyed down there. It's literally, you're on the bald butt prairies. It's a broken down barbed wire fence in spots with nothing around for a long ways in either direction. It's very easy to cross that without being noticed. And we can't pretend things haven't been crossing without notice. So with a little more, supervision, a little more security down there on both sides, hopefully we can get some degree of that under control anyways. You'll never stop it, as I was saying with David, but we don't have to make it easy. And I think that's part of why. I mean, down in Mexico, the Americans, they've got a real huge problem with migrants coming across that border, and they've built a wall, and they got loads of patrols, and they're constantly on that. They've got their blimps up there taking pictures. It's a very busy, problematic border. We don't want ours to turn that way. And that's part of why the Mexican cartels, though, are looking at Canada and saying, well, we can produce product up there and still get it to that giant consumer market in the States. It would just come down across the Canadian border because they don't watch that nearly as closely as the Mexican border. So I think both sides are kind of going to work on this. And it's hard to work both sides when you're dealing with somebody, again, as unpredictable as President Trump on things. But, he takes something that is a real issue and maybe exaggerates it, but it still remains a real issue. As was pointed out, if these guys are partnering and setting up on First Nations reserves, the reserves are just getting decimated with addiction and drugs, and they don't need the supply be coming right into their own backyard. That's only going to make it worse. As David pointed out too, these cartels, they operate rough. They take over towns. They murder their opponents. They're awful. So it's something that's got to be taken seriously. As another commenter said, we've always got them, but if they're getting even more entrenched, then we better pay attention. We do not need that here. We've got enough problems already going on. Speaking of which, I'll get to that. That's news that's hit the last couple of days, right? And Trump is doubling down on the tariffs again. Like, here we go. He's doubled the steel and aluminum tariffs. Oh, man. And Doug Ford was up We're going to talk a bit about that in the pipeline if you're watching that tonight. So Doug Ford's up there saying, we've got to put back the retaliatory tariffs. Ah, you moron. Doubling down on dumb just doubles the dumb. It doesn't make things any better. Two wrongs don't make a right. One of the few things that Carney did correctly was pull off the counter tariffs. And he did it secretly, and he did it in a self-serving way. But it was also because they're bad economics. It only hurts your own consumers. And Trump, he's just determined to hurt his own consumers, and we just got to keep letting him do it. It will hurt Canadian producers because as the price of your products going down there goes up, people tend to buy less of it, and it hurts you up here. But, I mean, as some of the estimates are talking, it's going to add thousands of dollars to the prices of vehicles in the United States by adding these tariffs to steel and aluminum down there. It's going to add to the price of beer cans for the Americans. And the tariffs against China, you know how quickly Trump started talking and reducing things and backing off with China? Because his base are the pajama pants wearing people who go to Walmart and dollar stores, and they get upset when they can't get their dirt cheap Chinese products. How do you think they're that cheap? They don't make them in the United States. They're not going to make troll doll cheap keychains for 50 cents each anywhere in the United States. They got to get those products from somewhere else. Unfortunately, Trump has hung up on tariffs. It's interesting that Elon Musk, now that they have parted ways, he was there to be temporary for the Doge thing, and he's done his time, and now he's moving on. And he was scathing of the Republican Party now overspending, putting out a massive bill. I mean, what's the point of cutting government when the government's still going to keep trying to spend itself rich? So he's been vocal on that. Whatever you might think of Trump, I know some people on here like him. I'm just sick to death of him already. I wanted to see the establishment shaken up. I know that the Democrats are worse in many, many ways. But boy, his economic policy stinks. It's terrible. It's fanatical. It's pushing, and it's not working except to put everybody into a bad position. And I don't know what's going to stop it. The G7 summit's coming up next week in Canada. Trump's going to be here along, with a number of the world leaders right here in Alberta. And I don't know, hopefully some sense comes out of that. It's hard to see or expect sense to come out of many things. As Dave mentioned, I was in Regina the day before yesterday. I was speaking to a crowd there. That was a Rebel Media event. We're friendly competitors, and I was a guest speaker at it. Yeah, 500-600 people there. It was a great packed, busy house. And just north of us at the same time in Saskatoon, the First Minister's meeting was happening, and 9 out of 10 premiers were there, and Prime Minister Carney was there. And they all came out all smiling. They always do after these. The one premier who wasn't there, though, was from BC, and that's David Eby. And Eby has come out because they're saying, we're going to work on the corridors and getting things across the country. The interesting things, it's not so much what's said, but what's not said. Carney won't say the word pipeline if his life depends on it. He's put out word salad. He's talked about everything since then, but he still won't say pipeline. Chicken. And Eby has come out and said pipeline because he says it's not going to come through BC. So you know what? The whole point of the First Minister's Summit was a waste of time. If one premier can stop that, it's a waste of time. I understand the Prime Minister wanting to work with the provinces. You see, we got to talk about what the point of a federation is. What's the point of all these provinces being stuffed in under one umbrella unless there's going to be some common guidance that makes sure everybody prospers? But when you got a cowardly, centralized government and Prime Minister in front of it who won't use the constitutional authority he does have, they'll step on provincial rights all over the place except where they're supposed to. No premier should have the right to stop an interprovincial infrastructure project. The Constitution says they don't have that right. It's the point of the federation that we can trade our products and goods and services across this country from end to end without hindrance from the provinces. And the federal government's too weak to enforce that. Thus, Quebec can stop Alberta from getting its product to the East Coast. BC can stop Alberta from getting its product to the West Coast. That's why I say it's time to rip this thing down to the core and rebuild it, because it's garbage. It's a federation that doesn't actually work. A good question from Cindy there saying, how do you decarbonize oil? Yeah, because that was one of the things he did mention, oil products, but we'll sell clean, decarbonized oil. What the hell are you talking about, you Fruit Loop? It is carbon product. It's a carbon-based product. It's just weasel words. More garbage out of him. He's a fanatic. He's got no intention of getting pipelines from coast to coast either. Commercialization. I mean, we've got good local products being done. I, for example, produce fantastic honey, beeswax, local goods. There's even secondary clowns like this Freedom Honey guy who makes kind of some moderately decent honey out there in north central Alberta. And as you can see, he's spamming my comment section there. But yeah, we've got a lot of industries out here. We've got diverse ones. But we can't reach our full potential if we've got a centralized government that's over-regulating everything, that's stopping us, that's based on ideology rather than reality. So this battle is going to keep continuing. These guys can go to their little summits and they can hold hands and come out smiling, but we need something concrete. I'm just saying we're going to bring in the regulations down so it only takes 2 years now to approve or not approve. Let's not forget, if they change the process, they can still say no. We're asking companies to invest millions and billions of dollars on studies, applications, licenses, all that garbage, kissing the asses of bureaucrats to try and get a job done, and they can say no at any time. They're not going to come in and spend the dollars. I'm getting worried about some of the talk, too, but the government should take it on and build the pipes like they did with Trans Mountain. Look what happened with Trans Mountain. We had a private interest willing to build it. Not a single dime of taxpayers' monies needed to go into it. But Trudeau ragged the puck and screwed with them and kicked them around so much they finally, Kinder Morgan said, we're out, we're done, we've had it. They were willing to lose the millions and millions they'd already sunk into this. Just like TransCanada Energy, same thing. When they went to Energy East, Trudeau regulated it out of existence and they just gave up. They lost $1 billion on that and more. They got to get real. 2 years, piss on that. We should be moving dirt within a few months. Look, it's been studied and studied and studied and studied. We know what pipelines are. We know what the impact of them is. We know how to mitigate it. We already have the regulations to make sure they're built effectively and safely. We don't need 2 years of navel gazing and meetings and bribery and consultation and all that crap to get one done. We just need to say it's time. We're going to put it in the ground. We will guarantee that you are allowed to get your project finished and profitable. Now that's up to the company, but get it finished. The government has to guarantee it because no private company is going to go in on a maybe any longer. Lucy has held the ball and Charlie Brown has fallen on his back too many times now. CB fixes all, says Pierre said 6 months to approve projects. Yeah, well, and it should be even less than that in my view. We should do it in a couple months. Paperwork, we got enough bureaucratic buttholes out there to be able to figure that out. But Pierre didn't win. Central Canada gave Carney the reins. So we're just not going to see it. They're just talking. Vamp Fashion saying with carbon capture and storage, modular nuclear, ambient capture, we can get to a decarbonized economy using oil and gas. Okay, it's ways we can talk around it. I know what you're kind of saying, but the cost is just catastrophic for some of those things. I mean, we want to examine different types of energy sources. The reality is the world desperately wants our products. They do. Asian markets want it. European markets want it. We just got to get it there. That means we got to get it past the nutcases in central Canada. And so here's one. See, it's interesting. A commenter saying you can't step over consultation laws because you are whining. And why do all the pipelines have to go through reserves and traditional territories? Okay. They don't go through the reserves. Look at the map, clown. But you see, we start going through that fake veto power that Indigenous people supposedly have. And then you mentioned traditional territories. Everything's traditional territories. And there were Neanderthals prior to them. We don't have to consult them, and I don't care. We've consulted them to death. We pay them lots already. And consultation doesn't mean consent. We don't need it. Get over it. It's enough. We don't need consent. We will consult. We'll do it in good faith. But we don't have to get permission, or we will never get it done. But that's the goal of some people. They don't want it to get done. So an independent West will get it done because you know what? When we cut off access across this middle chunk, they'll suddenly learn what economic grief is. And they'll suddenly learn common sense. All right. Either way, something else going on. We got the Global Energy Show, and we're going to be broadcasting live from the floor of that next week. That'll be fun. And that's where the energy superpowers and people are going to be gathering in Calgary as they do every year. It's huge. Check it out down there, guys. Another big meeting in Red Deer if you're looking for it. If you're looking for independence things, there's a big all-day thing on June 14th. I'll be speaking at that and set up as well, I think, at their trade show. And lots on the go. The pipeline is going to be on this evening, guys. Be sure to tune in for that. Nigel, Derek, and I are going to break down a few more of the issues and the other stuff. So follow all our channels, do all the liking and sharing and all that stuff those social media people all talk about. Be sure to subscribe to The Standard. It's important to us. Thank you all for tuning in today, guys. Tune in again next week, and I'll have a whole new things that I'll be ranting about live from that floor of the Petroleum Show. And I'll keep you up to date. Thanks.